Hello and welcome back.
Speaking of the dial of ideas, I guess we're gonna talk about the election, folks. Let's
Crank that shit up to 11.
Did it do? All right, folks. Yeah, so you've already heard him talk, which is great. Before I introduce him, we have Evan George of Boston DSA here, former
I'll
co-chair.
put applause in post.
I have applause.
It's whatever, dude. You don't even have
It's
to.
whatever, dude.
We'll fix it in post.
It's
Fix it in
whatever,
post. No
dude.
worries. There we go.
This doesn't stop, by the way. I can just keep it going.
As part of my contract to do guest spots on other podcasts, I require 15 seconds of applause. So that's okay. That was.
They
good.
didn't give you that on Reply, guys.
Yeah, I know. They edited that out. I don't know what happened.
Yes. And Evan is here to talk about the recent municipal elections in the greater Boston area, including Somerville, the DSA candidates that were run, the strategy, who won, who lost, and what we're hoping for the future. Just real quick, can you just kind of encapsulate what the strategy was for this election and what we were trying to accomplish?
Yeah, that's a great question. A great way to start. And so for people who don't know, I was the co-field coordinator, and what we decided to do this year was different than every other year, in that what we've always done in the past is we've had an ever-growing endorsement process. What does that entail? And then we eventually, once you go through that gauntlet, you get to use our DSA seal, and then we try to get people to come out and canvass for you. What we decided to do this year, and we've always been about 25% successful. We've done maybe 2, 3, 4 endorsements, and we've generally gotten 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4. And so this year we decided to form a core crew of super volunteers and try to run both parallel and then also coordinated campaigns with. We were advised by New York City DSA to pick one person, and we decided to do 12. And a lot of that had to do with the dynamics of Somerville. Just a lot of seats opened up, and it was just an exciting opportunity. And the second was we've never taken our chapter, dialed it to 11, and figured, if we called every member, texted every member, basically nonstop for 3 to 4 days a week for 6 to 7 months, how much can we actually get people to come out? And so that was really kind of like the big question. And now we have some great data that shows just like how much of our electoral punch do we have? And it is actually quite a bit, though we weren't successful in going 12 for 12. As I said before, we normally only get 1 to 2 wins a year, and this year we got 7. So we went higher than we've ever done before, and we ended up winning more than we've ever done before. And
I actually do have a question.
No, please. Yeah, and this format will be great if you all jump in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Obviously, I talk a lot about the election, so I'd love to hear some great questions and thoughts.
That's what we're having you on the show to do.
That's true. That's what people like me for. But yeah, Joe, what's your question? What do you got?
So I actually woke up a couple days ago to a message from a comrade who bounces between like Boston and New York, and he asked me why did Jeevan lost? And for people who don't know, we had DSA did have an incumbent, Jeevan Sabrina Wheeler, who did not succeed in getting reelected.
Was it Jeevan?
Yeah,
it's Jeevan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh fuck! I've been saying it wrong.
Jeevan rhymes with Steven. That's how I always remember that. Jeevan rhymes with Steven.
Wait a minute. Bart's teacher is named Krabappel? I've been calling her Crandall. Why didn't someone tell me? Oh, I've been making an idiot out of myself.
I know I did quite a bit of field work for him his first time around, but out of curiosity, why do you think he was unable to get reelected? I know he was almost got enough, but
So for that, there are probably 2 predominant theories. The first is the proportional ranked choice voting system that Cambridge uses, which is not like the most common ranked choice voting system that most municipalities or the state of Maine uses. It uses what's called the Cincinnati method. And basically, your votes can be wasted depending on what order do they select the vote, and then also who you ended up picking for number 1 if you got knocked off. So for people who know the weeds of this electoral system, it's very, very difficult to have two candidates running in the same lane, which would be the two Boston DSA endorsed candidates, Quinton or Jeevan, because they will do well enough that their secondary votes don't get reallocated as much as the other candidates. And now those two people, Jeevan and Quinton, were able to both successfully, Quinton re-election, Jeevan election last cycle, because Jeevan was able to also grab another large constituency of Cambridge. This goes into the second reason, and that is the Yimbys. So Jeevan was endorsed and supported heavily by the YIMBY coalition, Yes in My Backyard people, mostly because as leftists, we do all agree that the current zoning policies are too restrictive. They need to be changed. And what ended up happening this cycle is another candidate really went strong for YIMBYism and was able to sell themselves as the person who will get rid of single-family zoning, will increase developer capacity, go wild. And so Jeevan kind of lost a big pocket of support there. And then just, again, the proportional system of Cambridge. And, I mean, to be honest, if people want to blame, I'm going to say me for the third reason, I think that's okay. This was not what we expected to happen. Again, there was no prelim. There was no data to go off of. Jeevan was a well-liked incumbent, and we focused most of our energy on Somerville, on Boston, and almost assumed that he should be okay, but ended up being he got knocked out in the final round. I think he made it to round 11 or 12 of the Cincinnati method, and unfortunately was not reelected. Yeah. So we're still waiting to see things like demographics, like who voted, who didn't. Cambridge is slower than all the other ones. I can tell you voter participation for Boston, for Somerville. Cambridge just takes its time with that. So we need to look at the precinct levels areas to see like who turned out, who didn't. One of the big stories of this election all over the place was lowish voter turnout. And as everyone knows, young people just didn't show up. And so for a few of those dynamics, unfortunately, Jeevan was knocked off.
So who exactly, who won and who lost? I know that's a bit of a formal question, but
so with quickly with Cambridge, unfortunately, Jeevan was unsuccessful. Quinton Zondervan is successful, has his re-election. Up in Somerville, J.T. Scott and Ben Ewenkampen at the local ward levels were successful in their re-elections. Unfortunately, Becca Miller and Tessa Bridge were not. And then for the at-large positions in Somerville, we endorsed three candidates, Eve Sijek, Willie Burnley Jr., and Charlotte Kelly. Both Willie and Charlotte did win their at-large elections, which is an incredible feat. And unfortunately, Eve came in the fifth place spot out of what is a four-person race. And then down in Boston, Joel Richards was knocked out of a very competitive preliminary in September, but we did secure a massive win with Kendra Hicks in District 6. I was Jamaica Plain and West Roxbury.
Oh, hell yeah.
Probably the first open socialist to sit on the Boston City Council in maybe a century. Someone please do the fact checking, because I'm not going to. But most certainly the first black open socialist on the Boston City Council. And she went through an absolutely brutal race. Her opponent sent out this incredibly horrific racist mailer that I can get into if you'd like. A lot of abuse, a lot of threats, but she is an incredible candidate and probably like one of the strongest that I've ever seen our chapter endorse. And not to forget, though, also the final location we endorsed, Medford. We endorsed Zach Bayers, who was the number one overall vote getter for Medford. Fantastic. And a coalition up there, Our Revolution Medford, ended up securing, I think, 4 of their endorsed candidates who Zach also championed. I endorsed in my capacity. Our chapter did not. And so, we had some great wins and some tough losses. We got smarter and stronger, and looking forward to seeing what we do in 22 and 23.
What is the Cincinnati method?
It is basically a proportional rank choice voting system, which then adds like a flourish with how, like, the order that the vote gets allocated. I can't understand it. I can just tell you it is not the common ranked choice voting method that most people associate with RCV.
Okay. I was curious about that because I did try and look it up, and I looked up Cincinnati method, and it was either a seizure procedure or asbestos procedure.
So if you go to the Cambridge like elections department,
That's a good
they
idea.
define it as the Cincinnati method, but I, like you, am just like, I've never heard that, and like I'm just
Oh,
Googling
God.
everywhere. So I don't know. I don't know what to say.
All right. Well, that's I'm
If
I'm
you
I'm glad to
you
know it's
search
confusing.
Cincinnati vote method in DuckDuckGo, the third result is a Wikipedia entry called single transferable vote, which is what
Yeah.
Cincinnati method redirects to.
Hmm.
It
So
is
is it
a
like a
that's
variant of
basically
like the
what I
Scottish
got.
vote?
it is a voting system designed to achieve or closely approach proportional representation.
That's helpful.
That's wonderful wording. Jesus Christ. Oh, God. We love American democracy, don't we, folks?
It's a disaster no matter where you go.
Yeah.
We have
It's
to
just a different
return.
flavor.
Oh, oh.
We must return to what was before. Just I don't know. Get like 5.
Monarchy.
We must live in groups of like 10 people and
You know, that makes me
decide.
think of how the Globe was like right after Trump got elected, literally publishing op-eds being like, we should go back to like the British monarchy. Like, can we like have like openly?
What?
There were like op-eds that were openly like encouraging like the British monarchy to like re-annex the United States because we
Take
just
us
didn't want
back,
to deal
Daddy.
with that.
Take us back. Oh my God. So yeah, you spoke of a couple. We have incumbents, and this isn't meant to be like a loaded question or anything, but I'm curious, like what have they what policies have they or what have they pushed so far in their time in office?
Being dank as fuck.
Yeah, I mean, like being based is cool
Policy.
too.
Yes, we've gone on a pure dank platform. I mean,
Wonderful.
mostly. So we have
Dank for all who want it.
quite a few elected officials that have been endorsed by Boston DSA, either presently or within the recent memory, which was put in the last 4 years. 2 in the Statehouse, Erica Idahoven and Mike Connolly, and then again 2 in Somerville, Medford, Cambridge, and now in Boston. And most of our candidates' success has been really on 2 different factors. One is on climate, which of course encompasses transportation as well. And so expanding bike lanes, expanding tree canopies. I mean, some of the numbers that I have in my head is, I think, Jeevan helped create another 20 miles of bike lanes throughout Cambridge in just his one term there. And that's been replicated. Most of this, our municipal areas where we have Boston DSA members, they're going to be the furthest left where it comes to issues like climate. And then it's also around issues of housing is the second thing that we mostly see at the municipal level, pushing back on bad developments. There was a big fight. Again, Cambridge is still on my mind about courthouse, which was in public hands and then eventually switched to private, but it ended up being this very long fight where Jeevan and Quinton were able to be the leading forces to try to stop this effort. And so at the city level, that's mostly what we see. But then at the state level, Mike Connolly helped achieve what was at the time the strictest eviction moratorium during COVID in the nation. And Erica Idahoven has been really a lone voice in trying to reform what is, the most secretive city body or state body in the country where it comes to transparency at the Statehouse. And so those are really the issues that we fight for, and we've seen successes all over the cities and states.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah, reforming the system itself is, I feel like it's easy to gloss over policy like that because people who are worried about their immediate material conditions may not think that transparent voting body is necessarily impactful, but it makes a huge fucking difference if you can hold individuals accountable.
Especially with like our Statehouse, we very rarely even record how our legislators vote.
Oh God, yeah.
And most things are killed in committee, and none of that gets recorded of who voted yes or no. What are there any minutes notes? No, there are no notes. And so, like, it is a black box.
What's
right now, I think it's
that, what's really insane is that the legislature is like the only like entity in the Commonwealth that is exempt from like the records laws.
Yeah, like Boston City Council, for example, I can YouTube and watch their.
Yeah, I'm subscribed to their YouTube. Nobody fucking watches it.
Yeah,
maybe it's just us two.
Yeah, it might just be us.
2 views
we'll
are
talk in the chat.
But at least it's there.
And I mean, I think, like looking at like the reopening with COVID, I think every museum, sports arena, bar, restaurant, movie theater is open right now. The only thing still not open to the public, the Statehouse. And so,
Dope.
yeah.
Dope. No.
So at 2022, if any of you live in Boston and you want to run for the Statehouse, shoot me a DM.
Give it a try.
You know what also still isn't open?
When you get there, punch Richard Neal in his fucking face.
As a former constituent of his, yes, please.
Isn't
But
he in
also,
jail?
don't you need to tell
Yeah, he's the guy that was in
No,
jail.
he's out now.
Oh fuck. Okay.
Yeah, Dangel's out,
Sorry.
and now it's Vanna Howard, who is
Okay.
just the usual mediocre Democrat you get from Lowell.
Sarah, what were you trying to say?
Oh, I was gonna say, guess what else is not open yet? The snack bar at the Suffolk County Superior Court for the jury duty people.
Tragedy.
Travesty.
Fucking tragedy. Fucking tragedy of modernity.
And they are
Think
What the
of the
fuck?
treats.
What the fuck? Give me snack bar. Give me
I
death.
demand
you know?
hot dog.
Yeah.
and also they only accept $1 bills and vending machines. They don't have any there's no place for you to change dollar bills. If you don't have $5 bills, it won't accept that.
That's literally criminal.
This is
Even
literally-
those to use
this
the
is
credit
literally
card.
communism.
God.
that's
This is
fucking
literally
communism.
communism.
All the vending machines at my job, like, they reject coins, or I think it's just because they're all broken.
Joe, Jesus
Or
Christ,
they're
get a
all
new
full
job.
of-
You work in a nightmare world. What the fuck?
I just think it's
Oh,
funny
God.
because, like, that didn't even register to me. That's a thing that, like, people complain about. So I'll just pull out my card and be like, fine.
Yeah. You work in
Oh,
like
it is
a
a card reader?
mundane Tim Burton concoction.
Yeah,
it's true.
kinda.
It's true.
Which
Oh,
actually
that
is
that
very
really,
fitting because
yeah.
because
Now I'm just gonna imagine,
when
like,
Tim
whenever
Burton
you're
was
telling
good, that's
us
the interesting
about.
thing. Is that it's the mundane that's strange, not the.
It's like if
Strange.
Tim Burton made
Anyways.
a movie about like office
Yeah,
culture.
Scott's right.
Yeah, it's like Joe sitting in a car, but the car is like gray, and Joe's hat is gray. And,
Well, the car is gray.
And
It's
Joe's
claymation.
eyes are like
Joe's face
bright
is gray.
Claymation.
I'm blowing
purple.
my brains
And the
out.
steam-
And there's
the
like
smoke-
there's like a
The smoke
claymation
coming out of the
booth outside.
tailpipe is just like cotton
I'm in the
balls.
back seat. Just
There's a
fucking
bunch of
Gray
exactly.
matter splattered everywhere. Anyways, yeah. If you want to, I mean, if anything, I am no stranger to drama. So if you want to talk about the very vicious attacks that were launched against Kendra Hicks.
Yes, I
Yes,
apologize. I glossed it. I mentioned when I said there have been a lot of like
Boston is
sketchy,
a very
racist goings on. That was the one story that I forgot to include. I did talk about the Easter eggs filled with Michelle Wu
Really?
is
Oh,
a
yeah.
carpetbagger,
Yeah.
but I neglected to mention the Kendra Hicks attack ads. So please.
Yeah, and I mean, right before I get to that, a lot of the stuff with Michelle Wu that we were seeing, because it is incredibly rare for it to come from the campaign. So like you never see that. So like you'll see like those flyers that people were passing around in low income housing that say go to this Wu rally, they'll give you $100. So then when those people came up, whoever did it was hoping for some sort of a commotion and a flip out to kind of ruin the event. It's like you always see those little dirty tricks things. 2 years ago, somebody faked a Chinese Progressive Association
What the
mailer,
fuck?
and they ended up saying like, no, like they endorsed this person, and they were sophisticated enough that it perfectly looked like the CPA mailer written in Mandarin, I believe, but except they just changed who they endorsed, and then they went around flyering Chinese neighborhoods. So like you see those like dirty tricks in municipal politics all the time, definitely here in Boston, but you never see it come from the campaign. And in Kendra Hicks's case, you saw her opposition, Mary Tamer, what they did, and this is used, and you see this in every election cycle, but it's incredibly rare for Massachusetts, is they darkened her image, Kendra's image, on a mailer, putting her in like a black and white grayscale next to a shiny, bright, colorful image of Mary Tamer, a white woman, and then in the middle of it stated like there are stark differences between these two, and that was the entire like
Yeah, you
front
can't even
page
call
of
it a
the mailer.
fucking. You cannot call it a dog whistle because it was explicit.
Yeah, and I remember during like Obama's first election, they would have mailers where like they darkened his skin color. I know it's common if they're facing a Jewish candidate in some states, they like, literally make the nose bigger in like attack mailers. And so, like, but to see that in Boston, I mean, nothing should really surprise me with elections, but like that was strikingly vivid in terms of like darkening her image and then mailing that out across not just West Roxbury, which is probably one of the most conservative, whiter areas in Boston, but also in a JP. And it ended up backfiring
Yeah, looked
to the
absolutely horrible.
yeah, and I was standing outside a polling location during the election, and two people, when I'm talking to them about why they should vote for Kendra Hicks, two people said to me, "I made my decision when I saw that mailer that I was going to support Kendra." However, they also, and this is not so much of a racist angle, but something which is a little petty. I think it is somewhat in bounds, even though I think it is incredibly childish. But they went back and they printed Facebook like her Facebook posts and tweets from like 6 or 8 years ago.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And
Insane.
that was, and like, so her entire mailer was just like a timeline of Kendra Hicks' page, which, a lot of us would roll our eyes at. Like this is not like you are not advancing your own policies, your own purpose for why you're running. You're just doing like Facebook drama. But that was actually, I mean, Kendra won by a larger margin than she won in the prelim. Yeah, I think in the prelim she beat Mary by 1,250 votes. She ended up winning the general election by 2,200. So it's tough for me to say that it swayed anything. If, again, as we stated before, with that racist mailer. Oh, and we were name dropped, Boston DSA, in that mailer.
Oh.
If you flip it over on the back as sort of kind of like to create this contrast between them, it said endorsements. And while Kendra Hicks got more endorsements than I've ever seen a candidate receive, Ed Markey, Ayanna Presley, like 6 sitting city councilors, like 30 or 40 organizations, labor unions, to try to demonize her, they said endorsed by the Boston Democratic Socialists of America, who want a radical transformation of society from capitalism to socialism. Like that was just big on the mailer. And
based as fuck.
Oh, I know. I scream. I like we had, and this is props to I'm going to say all of you and your listeners. We had very good tweet discipline and message discipline during these campaigns because they wanted to have what they would see to be a lefty counter reaction to this. And we didn't, and because that would just fuel this fire, and Mary Tamer's only path to victory would have been to scare enough conservative white people in West Roxbury to come out. And so if we fed those flames, that would have happened. So good on everyone for just ignore this, and then we'll hit them later. So I have all this stuff that I, at the time, like, in my drafts. Thinking on it now, we're gonna be a little bit more strategic, because the people who sent that mailer, we're gonna make sure that if they are gonna try to find employment through any candidate or campaign in Boston, that they know who those people are and what they did. And and I believe in restorative justice, and her campaign manager is a relatively young guy. So there's redemption for everyone. I think that's part of being a socialist. But until that happens, we know who you are, and we know what you did.
We know what the bodies are.
Yeah, and we're gonna just see what candidates you try to get employed with, and they might get calls from multiple people, myself included, just being like, if you hire this person, we will never support you. And so, yeah, we're gonna handle it our way. But so Kendra faced a lot of that, obviously, a lot of death threats and racist messages.
Fuck.
But I mean, again, she is one of the most impressive people that I've met over the past year. And so I'm very excited to see what she does at the Boston City Council.
I also know in my heart of hearts that part of the reason Eve didn't make the top 4 in Somerville was that even in Somerville, some people are anti-trans, and that makes me really mad.
There was 100% an element to that.
Yeah.
In Eve's campaign, for sure. It's something that's very tough to measure. I mean, for obvious reasons, but Eve also faced a lot of transphobia and a lot of abuse for being as outspoken as they are on the issues, and for their bravery about what happened after the straight pride parade that must have been 2 or 3 years ago now, but that still routinely came up online. And so, yeah, Eve deserves a lot of credit for how they handled themselves and how their campaign was run. And again, municipal politics is tough. If the youth turnout, again, overall voter turnout in Somerville, I think was around 32%. If that was closer to 40, Eve would have won. And, that's always the big question is how do we expand the electorate? And no one has a sufficient answer to that, myself included.
So the city council in Somerville now, how many are socialists?
4 of 11? 413?
That's still pretty good, all things
Good.
considered.
I mean, we doubled the amount of socialists on it, and
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back
Oh,
to
we sound so
something,
excited.
that was
That's
mentioned
well.
about like the
Hold on. I want to hang on that moment for a second because that's like essentially the highest percentage of socialists on any city council in the country. Am I right?
that's possible with what 25%. We'll call it.
I thought Chicago
More than
was
that?
higher than
I thought
that.
Chicago. I think that's 10%.
Yeah.
Oh.
If it's 13 people, that's 30%.
Oh.
4 is 30%, 31 even.
Yeah, we may want to actually do that math so we can take that that
just did the
victory
math.
laugh if that is true.
Do-do-do-do.
I used my calculator app.
Oh no! I mean, I want
Hell
I want to
Oh,
make
you
sure
mean
that
nationwide? Yeah.
yes.
Oh.
All right. Well, stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. Maybe not this episode, but
Yeah, get back.
Well-
We'll get back. We'll get back.
in post, I'll probably check it. I don't know. We'll say. Well, we can pretend for now.
Either
There
way,
are
it's-
11. There are 11 to make it official. I just looked it up. So 4 out of 11.
That is
that's more than
fantastic.
that. That's 36%. That's more than a third.
I will take it.
God damn.
So
We
I
are
wanted
Sure.
doing
I wanted
great.
to go back to how like
Gonna go back.
conservative candidates like try to demonize like leftist campaigns or organizations, and then like
Ooh.
the tagline being like
Ooh.
putting it in a way that sounds really based. I just find it hilarious in general. Like the Asabi George campaign, like
Oh God.
was so on the nose
Get
about
into
it.
it.
Like I remember like the second debate, it was the second or third debate, where the moderator is literally asking a question in which it sounds like a gotcha, like what the fuck are you doing? Being like, so Asabi George, we have this poll from the Boston Globe that says like 60% of voters support rent control, and yet you are explicitly against it.
Sounds like the third
Why? Or what? Like 70% of voters want to like make the T free or at least improve public transportation. Yet you oppose that. Why? And then being like why do you oppose things in a way that makes it sound better and
I
think that's
do-
gonna work?
I want to bring up the fact that in that what was it, Bostonians for Progress,
Yep.
or was it the other
Something
one?
like that.
Yeah, it was.
Boston,
One of
real
them.
Progress Boston. It's one of the two.
I think that's right.
The one thing that was like huge in Michelle Wu's campaign that they didn't even fucking touch on was the fact that Michelle Wu basically said she wants to just completely abolish BPDA. Like in the ad, they touched on the defunding the police shit,
Thank you so much, Chester.
the making the tea free shit, although they rephrased it as defunding the tea, but they didn't even mention housing. Because it is such a popular policy. Like everybody pays too much for rent.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for people who
Except for me.
know what the BPDA is, honestly, if I was, I don't know, Dark Evan and a consultant, I would say bring that up because people are going to think it has to do with the police. Like,
Yes, you're right.
like just say the acronym quickly, and like people like will mishear it. But
BPDA.
yeah, I mean that agency is so toxic that they spent like a multi-million-dollar campaign to rebrand it. It wasn't always the BPDA. It used to be, I think, the BRA. Maybe about
Yeah,
14,
the Boston
14 years
Redevelopment
ago.
Associate or Authority.
And then,
Bra.
yeah, and like they just changed the name,
Bra.
and they do
Is it
have a great
bra?
website. I'll be honest,
It
I
was
was
a
on it
bra.
earlier today.
Is it a bra because they're like, ah, yes, we must contain the growth of urban
That is way too
development in
far thinking.
Boston. We
Oh my
can't let
God.
that stuff like
The
sag
it
and
was
get
the
all
Boston
over the place.
Redevelopment
Support.
Authority,
Yeah.
BRA. I got the acronym BRA.
Yeah, we must control the development
All right.
with our
We
with
must
our boulder
destroy-
holders.
Speaking of
That's too confident for them, Sarah. That's
Speaking
Are
of
there any
the
I
other-
didn't think of
Can I
that.
have-
DA. Speaking of the bra. So let's move on to the mayoral victory of Michelle
Can I ask
Wu.
a question first?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to ask if there's like, I know I live in Alston. I was just curious, like, what do you guys do about Alston? Like, I mean, I just know.
What is to be done?
Very honest question. I
Lee,
gotta
Lee Nave
appreciate it,
Jr.
you know?
ran
Very-
in the last election cycle. Lee Nave Jr. ran and did not get enough votes to advance from the primary.
I love the way you asked that. What do you do?
I wasn't sure what to say. I was like, well, what is your strategy regarding? I was about to say something like that, but I was like, I don't know what I don't even know what the strategy is regarding. I just like, you know, I looked at like the BDSA voting guide, and it's just like, yeah, there's just kind of two people, and they're neither. We don't really care about either of them. Just do what you want, basically. I don't know if there was like any particular challenge, or, like if it's just hard to get somebody to go for that seat.
Last year we did have a DSA endorsed candidate, and he was very explicit about his endorsement, and he ran in part on a flip tax, which would basically
Flip that tax.
you know how all the every fucking building in Alston is being demolished and replaced with like prefabricated squares. He would have pulled extra money out of the pockets of developers to put into public funding. So
I mean, I don't think we've seen the last of Lee Nave. I know Lee Nave was also all over Boston this election cycle. He's a great guy and a friend. But I mean, to answer your question, the reason why Alston Brighton is so tricky is because it has probably the most turnover in terms of its residents. It has probably the youngest population.
Students,
of the city of Boston. It's transient. It's mostly students. It's mostly renters, and it is incredibly difficult to get those people to register to vote. Part is because of how we have voter registration laws in Massachusetts. You have to be registered 20 days before the election, and so they generally end up scheduling preliminaries on like September 14th or September 7th, like a week. So like while most people in the city, as everyone knows, that turnover is on September 1st, and so
it is tricky. Yeah, it's very tricky. I did the primary and the regular election last year at as a poll worker, and there was like people coming in who had like just moved September 1st, and where they were like, I got everything set up like before I moved. Oh, I had to do this, you know, because you know Trump and stuff.
Yeah, if I recall, the voting in the primaries was on. Let me check this.
It was like really close to September 1st.
Yeah,
like September 2nd or something.
I know that people like actually made a pretty big deal about it, and basically were claiming, like as Alston residents, that it was an intentional move by the elections, whatever. Who the fuck is it? Commission of some shit or other.
I mean, it is 100% intentional that we do not change that.
Yeah.
We could have same-day voter registration. We could have a number of other common sense reforms that you see in 2/3 of states across the country, and we just don't have them here. But, I mean, I think there's a lot of hope in Alston Brighton. If you look at how they voted for the at-large races, overwhelmingly was supported the most progressive candidates. And so, you know, I think we made a massive leap this year in terms of our capacity and our skill sets around elections. How we supported Lee Nave's race 2 years ago is not at all how we would support if that race was this year.
I was right. September 1st was fucking election day.
That's what I thought. I was like, it was really soon.
What, this year?
Yeah. No, sorry, last year.
Last year with the Ed Markey race.
Christ.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's some bullshit. That's some Massachusetts bullshit.
Just basically telling students to fuck themselves.
Yeah.
We forget that you exist.
We don't give no shit, motherfucker.
Oh, they don't forget students exist.
No, it's like, oh, sorry, we totally forgot the date.
Oh, you're a student? You're here to expand your mind?
There's literally a holiday. The police set up the sawhorses all over the place because we treat it like a holiday because there is so much happening.
Alston Christmas.
I miss the Be Fresh because they would go out on the like recumbent bicycle with the bell and give people fruit.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
You're not going to elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Is there much
Please
to
elaborate for those of us who have never lived there.
Oh, they were Be Fresh employees that rode around Alston.
Oh, I thought like the Beat Fresh. Or like the...
Yeah, they were beaten fresh.
Okay.
Anyways, yeah, so Michelle Wu won, and we were speaking of the abolishment of the BPDA. And before, Evan, we were talking at a social event about the expectations, what we can judge Wu's administration on, if they're a success or not. So yeah, just if you could just elaborate on that in whatever way you would like to, because I think now we have a new mayor. We have a mayor who's a progressive. Again, take that as you will, and how whatever that term means to you is whatever it means to you. But there is hope that we can change things, and that things can we can stem a tide that has kind of overtaken Boston with the rampant development and the endless cardboard boxes that keep popping up. So what do we hope and what do we expect, especially with the fact that they in 2022 is the renegotiation of the contract. So please, thank you.
No, that's a great question, and especially the last few days, I've been really focused on what was Michelle Wu's biggest victory, which was not this mayoral race, where she absolutely blew out Anissa by, I think, 28 points, which is insane.
You got like 64-65% of the vote.
Yeah, 63.9 if you want to get technical. But her most impressive race was 2013, where she went from relative obscurity to getting the second highest most votes in an at-large race for Boston. And if you follow me on my little things, I'm going to go into how she did that. But basically what I'm getting at is, predating that, she has been on a relentless pursuit of power in Boston for well over a decade. And the biggest question is why, and you can label that for every elected official, even DSA backed candidates. Generally, you have some ambition and drive that make it so like you want to be the person, you want to sit in the chair, and Michelle has done this relentlessly for 12 years, and now she has the executive position, a massive mandate, a blowout win, lots of resources. I was looking at a transition team today, and she has, who is an incredible organizer. One of the realist is how I defined her on Twitter, Mimi Ramos, who's I think the director of New England United for Justice. Just like a very landmark figure in Boston real organizing, and I mean our type of organizing politics. And she's the co-chair of the transition team for Michelle Wu. So it is all just like, what is she going to do, and how much was her vision, her campaign, which at least on the policy side is around all these big ideas, if she's actually gonna really fight to make things happen. And I am incredibly skeptical that is what will happen. If I had to guess, we're going to see a lot of great pilot programs. We're going to see a lot of marginal improvements in some things. But if I right now had to guess, and you put a gun to my head, are we going to see that someone who's willing to actually completely abolish the BPDA and create something strikingly different? I would be shocked, and I would love to be surprised by that. I was surprised at her vote on this year's budget, where she voted no, because I figured that was going to be a liability, and Issa Sabi George tried to make it a liability, but the race was over the day after the prelim ended for that. Kim Janey really messed up, but that's a separate topic. And so what I think the big measurement for her campaign, she's getting sworn in on November 16th. They're going to do like a soft ceremony and then kind of a big one in January. So I think she'll probably use from November 16th to inauguration day for the rest of the city council. It's kind of like a warm up. I think she's still going to say, hey, I'm still in a transition. I'm still doing stuff. Cut me some slack. She has enough goodwill built up that'll last. But the big fight is going to be over that BPDA. And is she willing to completely blow it up? Is she going to just accept some marginal changes? Or is she going to accept some larger changes? And we're going to find that out in 2022 and what that'll look like. And I mean, the Boston City Council is right now, there's a fight over who's going to be the president of that. So we'll see who gets control of that mantle. But we'll see. I mean, for, again, this podcast, this audience, healthy skepticism and continue to push and challenge.
Now, on the matter of public transportation, what do you realistically expect to happen?
Joe is reading my mind.
We'll see increased pilot programs that'll be paid for free busing. So we currently have one free bus in Boston, Route 28. or bus 28. I mean, which goes from Roslindale to Mattapan, and that it was supposed to end its pilot program. However, just today, Kim Janey extended it a month because of how successful it's been at increasing ridership. It came in under
Oh.
budget, and
Oh.
I'm imagining what we'll see is throughout a Wu term is
Ooh.
different bus routes throughout Boston will be made free for certain like extended periods of time. That to me is the most realistic thing that we can expect over the next 4 years.
Do you think she's realistically going to fight the Statehouse in any meaningful way on like freeing the tea?
I mean, honestly, if she wanted to, she could come out and put her arm around 4 or 5 primary challengers of state reps throughout Boston who are facing incumbents who suck, and that to me would be I don't expect that at all. But I mean, that's what I mean. Like, I would love to be blown away by someone who has been just pursuing power for this long and then is going to just wield it like a bat. And that is not how her demeanor is. And I think she knows how to present herself, and she is incredibly intelligent in how she presents herself. That's why Anissa, none of her attacks work, because people just like Michelle's is a nice person. I've had a lot of great conversations with her.
Savvy
She
George
presents
is like
that way.
an
We actually
unpleasant
mentioned as much on
person
the
to be around.
podcast because my mom is quite the normie, and she watched part of the last debate with me, and she watched 4 minutes of the debate and goes, "Yeah, talking about Savvy George. Yeah, she's a crazy person who's just like throwing shit at the wall and trying to see what sticks."
I mean, I think Anissa comes off very well in debates, but
She gave me like Amy Klobuchar vibes, where like she like vibrating with rage. That's the vibe I got.
That's a good comparison. I'll take Amy Klobuchar. I think Anissa is actually, her stage presence is a little bit more impressive. But again, like, if Michelle Wu is going to seriously challenge the State House, she's going to need to have State House members in Boston that are going to actually fight for some of this stuff. And so we'll see.
The thing you just said, I don't actually disagree with at all. Like, Michelle did come off kind of like
wishy-washy.
Well, like, I don't want to like kind of meek in comparison,
was like the way I think she was trying to present herself.
What was it?
I mean, honestly, it's just like debates and public speeches. That's really just, it's not her thing. She's just incredible on one-on-ones, and if you look at, I think, how she really got to where she is, and how she kind of just built up this base throughout Boston almost overnight in 2013. It has to do with she got a massive Rolodex and is incredible on one-on-ones, and she just built that first and then ran for office. But again, we're going to see like why, why would you dedicate 12 years of your life to this? Like, what do you want to do? Because she can make marginal improvements on the edges and do it. I don't know why somebody would want to do that. It just sounds boring and like a waste of time.
Maybe?
But I mean, someone else will keep it between this podcast and your audience, who is a lot more in touch with community organizing here in Boston than I am, who told me Michelle will be gone in term.
Oh, I think so.
Michelle's going to ramp up and be at the national level. She said maybe she'll finish the full term, but she'd be shocked if she's here like longer than 4 to 6 years. So everyone keep that in the back of your head.
Yeah, like I've already heard, like, she isn't even mayor yet, and I already hear people talking about her running for Senate.
Possible.
Well, didn't you fucking say governor last week, dude?
Is that I could actually realistically see that happening if like the
you said
the cards
governor
drop in the right way.
No, she won't run for governor.
No, you said that, Joe.
No, I said she was more popular than the governor. Like, her approval rating is higher than Baker's right now.
Yeah,
that
probably.
was just as like that's just like a comparative like metric.
I believe you said, Scott, fuck that, she's old enough. President. Bitch.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I just was making an observation. She's 36. Right. She could be president. I've heard people say, like, oh, she should try to run for president at some point. And I'm like, what? Okay, calm down. I actually think it's funny. Fuck, yeah. Anyway.
I'm now quickly imagining that. That'd be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it. Whatever. Who cares?
So you do think this is like just a stepping stone to like?
I mean, those aren't my words. That was somebody else.
Those aren't my words either.
I don't know. I'm very curious. Again, we're gonna see. She's in the chair now. Like, what was all this for? All right.
12 years
Yeah.
an elected official.
But I mean, to narrow it, because like you need to have concrete benchmarks. What is she going to do with the BPDA? Because I don't care if the organization in some capacity exists. The largest problem with the BPDA, and you saw this in New York City under Robert Moses in the early 20th century, is that it is a self-funded agency which does not need any democratic budget to control it. So there's nothing our city council can do to influence the direction of the BPDA because they have their own internal revenue source. They're independent. And so if you have an agency like that, it can just do whatever it wants because it doesn't need to come to you for their salaries every year. And so if the BPDA ends up existing a year and a half from now, if you really want to change it, you have to rip that out and you need to make it so it is accountable to democratic processes. And you cannot do that if they control their own revenue stream. And so if she rips that out, whatever, you want to keep the acronym, keep the acronym. But that is one of the big things you'd have to change to actually get housing policy done correctly in Massachusetts, or in Boston at least.
It's like the opposite of what usually happens is you just change the acronym and keep the institution.
Yeah, which I don't think she'll do that. That would be fun. I mean, she's smart enough that she wouldn't do that, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I just want to briefly talk about the ballot questions, because as I was talking to Hava about this earlier in the week, that I think the ballot questions like speak more to like what's like what the city is actually like. You know, like elected officials can say whatever to get elected and promise whatever, but like I think the ballot questions like actually speak to like what the city is like actually like thinking about and feeling and concerned. And so I don't think we reported fully what happened on the show last week, but like basically yes passed, 2 no, 3 yes. And
yes, and those were all the correct answers.
Basically, yeah. And I think that's the city kind of putting their foot down and saying like, we want more democracy and enough of this other bullshit, you know?
Yeah, and Michelle Wu, before that question was voted upon, she fully endorsed having an open democratic process with the public and the city council, and she continues to at least profess support for that.
I mean, she would have looked incredibly foolish if she tried to backtrack on that. And
Yes.
I mean, just so your audience knows. So, question 1 made changes to the city charter, which allows the Boston City Council to make changes to the mayor's proposed budget. You need to have 7 people to kind of act in concert to get this done. And then I think if you get 9 in concert, you can override a mayor's veto. Michelle Wu gets to pick the dollar amount. $4 billion will probably be the next budget. But then you can tinker it. You can make amendments and changes to it. Again, I think you need 7. That's the magic number. And that overwhelmingly passed 2-1. Question 2 was about whether or not a substation should be placed in East Boston.
The wording of that one.
Yeah, the
again,
wording was hilarious. I
fantastic.
can't believe they allowed that. I think the reason they did was because it's non-binding, and so everyone was just like, who cares? Just okay, write about the playground and the jet fuel.
That's my backyard, so appreciate everybody's thinking about me. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, because they can't just move it to an empty lot in Logan Airport, which is like 1.5 miles away. You know, to put it by a bunch of kids in a flood zone.
Yep.
So yeah, and that got blown out too. I think 75-80% voted yes. No, I'm sorry, voted no on that. 83% for no. And then question 3, and this one was actually a shocker to me. I didn't expect it to pass, especially by this margin, was, again, another non-binding, but do you want to go back to having an elected school committee? Yes or no? And 78% said yes.
Just out of curiosity, why did that surprise you so much? Like, I've heard from lots of Bostonians that one of the most corrupt systems in the city is like all the school boards.
I mean, so it makes a lot of sense. Like, again, looking back, that everyone is just mad at schools right now for, a lot of it is pent up frustration around COVID. Some of it is ridiculousness around like critical race theory, but everyone just, I think right now has an anger towards schools. And I think this is maybe how it was expressed in terms of the voters, but it's really because a lot of people have still horrific memories of the desegregation from the early 1970s, and they just associate that mentally with an elected school committee. And so a lot of people I was talking to were just like, I don't want to go back to that. Like those times were horrible. I don't want to go back to that. And so I thought it was probably going to pass, especially because there was there were no counter campaigns against any of these. Like there was money, there were organizers, there was a field campaign between all three of these ballot initiatives, and there was nothing on the other side. So if like charter schools were really worried about this, they would have dumped money, and that race would have been a lot closer. So we'll see what ends up happening to it. But yeah, all good things for the ballot questions. I was happy.
I feel like charter schools, if they feel threatened, when it becomes a binding resolution, they'll start bullshit ads.
But again, like no one was pushing money to go against this, and so we had the wind at our backs for it, so it was good.
Yeah. Does anybody? I don't have any more questions really. Does anybody else have questions?
No.
All right, perfect. We did it.
Joe.
I was gonna say you all go late.
Disappointed with Joe. Yeah, that's another thing. It's
Why are
getting
you
late,
disappointed?
folks. Because you have a lot of good questions. Surprisingly, I love it.
Surprisingly.
Yeah. God damn
You
it.
might need some help editing this one this week.
Maybe.
My only question would be like,
Thanks for the support. Thank you.
Yeah.
my question would be overall, like, where do you see like the situation with like the region as a whole being in like a couple years, like electorally, because outside of Boston.
I mean, it's difficult. Like, if you're going to expand it to 2022, everyone is going to be doomer-ified or whatever you want to call it after the midterms. And everything that we're going to see on the national stage will continue to like deteriorate. And even though voter participation is increasing for at least the general elections, and everything's becoming a lot more electrified at the two ends for people just flipping out in the suburbs. I mean, what that's going to look like in Boston, I don't know. It's all uncharted waters right now, which is why I'm really
I happen to
curious
be
to see what Michelle wants to do.
I happen to be in an area where like basically everything is just electorally is a shit show. Like, I voted in the Lowell City Council race, and there was only one candidate who wasn't like pro cop in the entire city. There was one like left leaning candidate who was running in a district across town, and he of course ended up losing. But like, I have never voted in an election where I have been so deeply dissatisfied with literally every single candidate, because they're all like, we need to give more money to cops, the landlords don't have it like easy enough, or like, we have worse traffic congestion than Boston, but like the issues we should be worrying about are speeding. And that's just like sums up the region. And so like, Boston may be doing well, but like I'm worried about the rest of the state. Just kind of.
And I mean, it's very difficult to even say Boston's doing well. I mean,
like electorally compared to like the
Yeah.
rest of the state in terms
And
of electing socialists.
I think everyone here, even though I mean, I know I'm kind of known as like one of the electoral guys for DSA, like we're not gonna vote our way out of this. And everyone understands that. I focus on this stuff so people know what's going on. And then secondly, because who we get elected is the terrain that we do the other work on. And
Absolutely.
so having Wu as mayor gives us better terrain to fight on than if it was Anissa. And so like the actual battle area is important. And that's what, but yeah, it's going to get bad. So
Yeah,
everyone do everything, and
yeah, that's
something
kind of what I meant by well is like the terrain is much more less hot. It's a less hostile terrain than like a place like Lowell, where like just a suggestion of like doing anything like marginally around like nibbling around the corners is like somewhat considered to be like in bad taste. Like, the political environment is very, very hostile.
Yeah, well, if you can figure out the question of how do you get young people to vote, you'll solve the answer. So let me know if you figure that one out.
Yeah, Joe. It's all on your shoulders, baby.
Yeah. How do you expand the electorate? Because I don't know how to do it, and I haven't read any convincing things about how to do it either. But
I'll get back to you on that one.
Sounds good. I think I'm gonna call it a night. Gonna get a little high and go for a walk. So
sounds like a good idea.
Right. Thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me on. It's good. Good joint DSA
Actually,
podcast.
That's a perfect place to end it. If you need to go, that's excellent. Thank you, Evan. Just real quick, pimp out your social medias where people can find you.
Yeah, I'm Bostopia News on just about everything. People like my TikToks. I don't know if there's a crossover for the TikTok audience, but daily local news podcast. Doing a new little series starting tomorrow night called the Woo Watch. We're going to get into some of that 2013 stuff I was talking about. So yeah, fun stuff. Follow me on all that.
Hell yeah.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well,
Night, man.
thank you for
Thanks,
having me
Evan.
again.
Have a good evening. All right.
Please do us a favor, share this content. Do yourself a favor, enjoy your epoch.
I've been calling her Crandall.